My name is Edith Barmbrack, and I am 77 years old. I have lived in Phoenix City in a large house on Oak Street for nearly 50 years. I wake up at 5 o'clock every morning, although I haven't worked for a long time. A habit left over from the days when I taught elementary school. My legs aren't what they used to be, arthritis is doing its job, but I still go down to the kitchen first so I can have a quiet cup of coffee before the others wake up. This is the house my husband Harry and I bought when he got a promotion at the steel mill. I remember how excited we were about every little detail: the hardwood floors, the wide windowsills, the spacious porch. Harry said our children would have a place to run around. We only had one child, Hayden. The doctors said there would be no more, so I accepted it. I put all my energy into our only son. Maybe that was a mistake. Too much love can sometimes be suffocating. When Harry died 12 years ago, the house passed completely to me. Hayden had married Laurel by then and was working as a manager for an auto parts company. I wouldn't say I liked my daughter-in-law at first sight. There was something cold, calculating about her. But a mother always wants to see her son happy, so I kept quiet. When they had their first child, Bryce, they asked to stay with me. "Just for a year, Mom, until we save up for a down payment," Hayden said. A year turned into 2, then 5. Now they have 2 kids, Bryce and Penny, ages 10 and 8, and they still live in my house. Although, to be honest with myself, it's not really my house anymore. Little by little, room by room, they've been displacing me. First, the guest bedroom was cleared out for them. Then Harry's study was turned into a nursery. Now I live in a small room on the first floor that used to be a sewing room. All my things fit into one closet and dresser. The rest is stored in boxes in the basement if they haven't already thrown them away secretly from me. Laurel rearranged the living room furniture yesterday without asking me. She just hired some guys and they took out the couch Harry and I used to sit on in the evenings. In its place was a cream-colored leather sectional monster. "That old sofa was so dull, wasn't it, Edith?" she said, pointing to the new purchase. "And don't look at the price, it's an investment in comfort." She always calls me by my first name, never Mother or even Mrs. Barmbrack. Just Edith, like I'm a neighbor or a casual acquaintance. I wanted to object but only nodded. It's no use arguing. I always end up being the guilty and ungrateful one. Hayden hardly notices these minor humiliations. Sometimes I think he encourages them. My boy has changed a lot in recent years. He used to call every day, asking how I was, if I needed help. Now he walks past me in the hallway, staring at his phone and barely says hello. I can't tell you exactly when it all went wrong. Maybe the first time I kept silent in response to rudeness. Maybe it was when I stopped asserting my right to my own space. Or maybe it's that for too long I've just been the handy grandma who's always on hand. The grandchildren are the only joy in this house, though even with them things aren't easy. Laurel has her own ideas about parenting, and I am constantly being made aware that my methods are outdated. When I praise Bryce for his good grades, Laurel intervenes. "Don't emphasize the results, Edith. It's the process that counts. I've been a teacher for 30 years, but what do I know about today's kids?" Penny loves it when I tell her stories about the past, especially about when Harry and I were first married. She climbs into my lap and I speak in a low voice so Laurel won't hear. She caught us doing it once and made a scene. "Don't fill the child's head with these old-fashioned fairy tales," she shouted. "What kind of example are you setting? A woman who devoted her life to her husband and her home? We need to foster independence in Penny." I didn't need to remind her that I'd worked in school for 30 years, had a master's degree in education, and had paid for this house with my husband. Laurel hasn't worked since Bryce was born. "I take care of the kids," she says. That said, the kids are often left to me, especially on weekends when she and Hayden go away for a break from the routine. My duties in the house are tacitly defined: making breakfast, picking up the kids from school, helping with lessons, sometimes going to the store for groceries. I don't mind helping, but I am never thanked. It's taken for granted, as if I'm practicing the right to live in my own home. The other night I made my mother's casserole for dinner. Hayden barely touched his plate. "Mom, don't you think it's too caloric?" he asked, pushing the food away. "Laurel and I are watching the food." "I'm sorry I didn't warn you about my cooking plans," Laurel added with a fake smile. "But we already ordered salads from that new place. Maybe next time, Edith?" There was no next time. I stopped cooking for them, only sometimes for my grandchildren when they asked, and then secretly, so as not to cause further conflict. My friend Vivian, the only one who still calls me, says I should put them in their place. This is your house, Edith. You're letting them boss you around, she repeats. Easy for her to say. Vivian lives alone in an apartment, and her children visit her on holidays with gifts and respect. I'm afraid of being all alone, afraid that if I start demanding respect, Hayden will take the kids and leave. And then what? A big empty house with no one around? At my age, loneliness is worse than humiliation. Last Tuesday, something unexpected happened. Hayden came home from work unusually excited. He even kissed me on the cheek, something he hadn't done in years. Mom, we have amazing news, he announced at dinner. We're going to Europe, a 2-week tour of Italy, France, and Spain. That's wonderful, dear, I said, trying to look happy. I felt a twinge inside. I'd have to sit with the kids for 2 weeks again while they had fun. And you're coming with us, he continued with a smile I hadn't seen in a long time. I froze with my fork in my hand. Me? To Europe? Yes, Mom. We thought it would be a great opportunity for the whole family to spend time together. You've never been to Europe, have you? I shook my head. Harry and I had always put it off for later. First there was no money, then there was no time, then there was no health. That's so sweet of you, I mumbled, tears welling up in my eyes. Don't thank me, Laurel interjected. Family has to stick together. Something in her tone made me wary. Years of living with her had taught me to recognize falseness, but the urge to believe in the best was stronger. What about the children? Who will be with them? I asked. They're coming too, Hayden answered. All together, one big happy family. A happy family. When was the last time I felt like I was part of a happy family? Maybe when Harry was alive. He always had a way of smoothing things over between me and Hayden. When are we going? I asked, still not believing my happiness. In 3 weeks, Hayden answered. I need to renew your passport and buy some things. Laurel will help you with your closet. Of course, my closet wasn't up to their standards. I wore simple cotton dresses and cardigans, comfortable shoes. Laurel always looked like she stepped off the pages of a magazine, perfect styling, manicures, brand-name clothes. I'll need something modern, she said, eyeing me with an appraising gaze. Something that wouldn't scream provincial grandma. I swallowed my resentment. After all, they're taking me to Europe. We can put up with that. The next few days passed in a flurry. Passport renewal, doctor's appointments for certificates and prescriptions for medications to take with me, shopping for a suitcase and clothes. Laurel insisted that I buy the right things and took me to an expensive mall. Look, Edith, these pants will look great on you, she said, handing me a pair of tight black pants. They're too tight for me, I objected. You're just not used to modern clothes, she replied with that condescending smile that made my teeth chatter. I eventually relented, buying several sets of clothes I didn't like. But I told myself I was doing it for a greater purpose, to bond with my son and his family. In the evenings, when everyone had gone to their rooms, I pulled out an old atlas and looked at maps of Europe. Venice, Paris, Barcelona, places I had only seen in movies and on postcards. Would I really get to see them with my own eyes? Bryce and Penny were excited about the upcoming trip, too. They came to my room and asked me about what we were going to see. Grandma, is it true that Venice has canals instead of streets? Bryce asked. Would we see the Eiffel Tower in Paris? Penny echoed him. I said yes, we would, even though I knew no more about those places than they did. But those moments were the happiest I'd had in years, when my grandchildren looked at me with genuine interest, not as a burden to live in their home. A week before I left, I started packing. My new suitcase, blue with silver inserts, looked ridiculous next to my old furniture. I neatly folded the new clothes, still with tags, and thought about how my life would change after this trip. Maybe Hayden would remember how much he loved me as a child. Maybe Laurel would see me not as a nuisance, but as a woman with experience in history. Maybe we'll actually become a family. The night before my flight, I barely slept at all. A mixture of excitement and fear kept me awake. What if I got sick in a foreign country? What if I disturbed them with my slowness? What if this trip was my last chance to regain what had once been between my son and me? In the morning, when I left the room with my suitcase, Hayden was already loading my things into the car. He looked annoyed. "Mom, you're late. We said 6 in the morning," he said, taking the suitcase from me. "I'm sorry, honey. I was checking to see if I forgot anything," I replied. "I hope you took all your medications," Laurel interjected. "We can't waste time looking for pharmacies in Europe." "Yes, it's all here." I patted my travel bag. In the car, I sat in the back with the kids. They were sleepy and quiet, but I could feel their excitement. Bryce was clutching the new tablet they'd bought especially for the trip to his chest. Penny was cuddling the stuffed cat she hadn't parted with since she was 3 years old. As we pulled onto the highway to the airport, I watched the houses and trees float by and thought, maybe this trip was the beginning of a new chapter in my life. Maybe, finally, after all these years, I would feel needed and loved again. How wrong I was. Rome welcomed us with the scorching sun and crowds of tourists. I have never seen so many people of different nationalities speaking different languages. The Fiumicino airport was chaotic with people carrying suitcases, children screaming, and announcements in Italian, English, and some other language I couldn't recognize. Hayden took on the role of leader of our little expedition. He led us confidently through the crowd, holding the map phone in one hand and Penny's hand in the other. Laurel followed him with Bryce. I weaved in the tail, trying to keep up and not get lost. My new wheeled suitcase kept getting stuck in the cracks in the floor, and I had to stop to free it. "Mom, keep up," Hayden said irritably over my shoulder when I was late again. "We're going to be late for the shuttle." I quickened my pace, feeling my heart pounding. I hadn't slept much on the plane. I'd never flown this far before. 12 hours in a cramped economy seat had been hard on me. My legs were swollen, my back was aching, and I was dizzy from sleep deprivation and jet lag. Our hotel was located in the historic center of Rome, not far from Piazza Navona. It was small but elegant, with a marble floor in the lobby and an ancient staircase. The receptionist, a young Italian man with perfect English, greeted us and began checking us in. "We have 3 rooms booked," Hayden said. "One for my wife and me, one for the kids, and one for my mother." The receptionist checked on the computer and nodded. "Yes, I see the reservations. We have 2 rooms overlooking the square and one with windows to the courtyard. How do you prefer to allocate?" Hayden didn't even look at me. "My wife and I and the kids, the one overlooking the square. The one facing the courtyard for the mother." I didn't object. After all, what difference does it make where the windows face if you're in Rome? But the first disappointment already stung. Why didn't he ask my opinion? When we got to the 3rd floor, the elevator in this ancient building was so small that the 4 of us could barely fit in it, so I went up separately. Hayden handed me the key. "Your room is at the end of the hall, Mom. Laurel and I will be here, and the kids will be across the hall. Get settled in and get some rest. We'll meet downstairs in 2 hours for the tour." I nodded and dragged my suitcase down the long hallway. The room was tiny, a narrow bed, a small closet, a table and a chair. The bathroom was so cramped I could barely turn around while standing in front of the sink. The window did face the courtyard, or rather a narrow well between buildings with nothing but vents and other people's windows. I sat down on the edge of the bed and took a deep breath. "Don't despond, Edith," I said to myself. "You are in Rome. In Rome." But fatigue and a slight disappointment had already settled inside. After laying out my things, I decided to take a shower and get some rest before the tour. The water in the shower was barely warm, and the pressure was weak, but I still felt better afterward. After changing into one of the new dresses I had bought for the trip, I lay down on my bed and fell asleep unnoticed. I was awakened by a knock on the door. When I opened my eyes, I didn't immediately realize where I was. The knock came again, more insistent. "Grandma, open up! It's us!" came Bryce's voice. I hurried to the door. My grandchildren stood on the threshold, dressed to go out, followed by a scowling Hayden. "Mom, we've been waiting for you for 20 minutes, he said reproachfully. "Everyone's ready but you." "I'm sorry, honey. I must have fallen asleep," I mumbled, smoothing my hair. "Give me 5 minutes." Hayden looked at his watch. "We're on a scheduled tour. We're already late." "Go ahead. I'll catch up with you," I suggested. "Tell me where to go." "Mom, you won't find it. This is Rome, not Phoenix City, he replied irritably. Children, wait for Grandma here. Mom and I will go downstairs. The guide is already waiting. Catch up with us as soon as she's ready. With those words, he turned around and left without even waiting for a response. The children obediently went into my room. Grandma, Daddy's angry, Penny said, sitting down on the bed. It's okay, sweetie. I'll get ready quickly and we'll go, I replied, frantically searching my bag for my hairbrush and lipstick. 10 minutes later, we were down in the lobby where our guide, an energetic middle-aged Italian woman named Julia, was waiting for us. Hayden and Laurel stood nearby, clearly unhappy with the delay. Finally, Laurel grumbled. Julia, this is my mother-in-law, Edith. She's been a little late. Julia smiled at me. That's all right, Signora. Rome is not going anywhere. It has stood for 2,000 years, and it will stand for as long. Her goodwill cheered me up a little. We left the hotel onto a narrow cobblestone street and the tour began. Julia talked about every building, every square, every fountain with such enthusiasm that it was impossible not to be infected by her love for this city. The children listened attentively at first, but soon began to get cranky. I'm hot, Penny whined, and I'm thirsty. It's boring, Bryce echoed her. Can I play on my tablet? Laurel, annoyed by their behavior, turned to me. Edith, take the kids and find a coffee shop. Hayden and I want to finish the tour. Meet me at the Trevi Fountain in 2 hours. I was disappointed. I wanted to hear the history of Rome too. But I obediently took my grandchildren's hands and went in search of a cafe. We found a small pizzeria not far off the tour route. The kids perked up at the sight of pizza and sodas. The Vatican had its first major conflict. We stood in the Sistine Chapel, heads cocked toward the painted ceiling created by Michelangelo. Bryce, tired from standing in long lines, was getting cranky. I want to go home, he whined. It's boring here. Bryce, this is the greatest work of art, I said. Look at the colors, the figures. See, that's God creating Adam. Grandma, why are they all naked? Penny asked loudly, pointing at the murals. Several tourists turned around and smiled. Because during the Renaissance, the human body was considered beautiful, I began to explain. Artists depicted people without clothes to show the perfection of the forms God created. Edith, Laurel intervened sharply. What are you saying to the children? I'm just explaining art to them, I replied, surprised by her reaction. You're talking about naked people. They're 8 and 10 years old. Laurel, it's educational information. They're in a museum. They're seeing these murals. I don't want my children's heads filled with talk of nudity, she insisted. We have our own system of education. As usual, Hayden sided with his wife. Mom, please respect our parenting methods. If Laurel thinks this topic is inappropriate, then it is. I was silent, feeling the color of shame flood my face. People around us began to look back at our argument. Julia, our guide, delicately took the children aside, showing them something on another wall. That evening, when we got back to the hotel, I decided to try to patch things up with Laurel. I knocked on their room as Hayden took the kids to the rooftop pool. Laurel, can I come in? I asked when she opened the door. Of course, Edith, she replied, letting me into the room. Their room was twice the size of mine, with a balcony and a view of the square. I wanted to apologize for today, I began. I didn't mean to overstep my bounds. Laurel sat down on the bed and pointed to my chair. Edith, let's be honest. We took you on this trip because Hayden was feeling guilty. You always say you've never been to Europe, that it was the dream of your life. He wanted to make you feel good. I was surprised by her candor. I'm grateful for the opportunity, I am. But you have to understand your role, she continued. We're a family, Hayden, me, and our children. You're a grandmother who can help out sometimes. But we make the parenting decisions. Her words were like a slap in the face, but I held back. It's just sometimes it's hard to keep quiet when you see an opportunity to teach your kids something new. Do you see it? There it is. Laurel pointed her finger at me. You think you know best how to raise our children. It's disrespectful to us as parents. No, that's not what I meant, I tried to explain. I just want to be helpful. Then be as helpful as we ask you to be, she cut me off. Don't overstep your boundaries. The conversation was clearly not going well. I stood up, feeling even more alienated than before. Okay, Laurel, I'll be more careful. As I left their room, I heard her talking on the phone, apparently to Hayden. Yeah, I talked to her. I hope she understands her place now. Her place. Like I wasn't a member of the family, but a hired hand. From Rome, we traveled to Florence, then on to Venice. Each city was beautiful in its own way, but my joy of traveling was fading. Increasingly, I stayed with the kids while Hayden and Laurel explored the sights. More and more often, they went out for romantic dinners, leaving me at the hotel. Increasingly, I felt like a free babysitter rather than a tourist. There was a moment in Venice when I tried one more time to make a relationship work. Hayden and I happened to be alone in Piazza San Marco when Laurel took the kids to feed the pigeons. It's beautiful here, isn't it? I said, looking up at the majestic cathedral. Yeah, it's incredible, he replied, snapping a picture with his phone. Hayden, do you remember when your dad and I took you to Washington when you were 12? He looked away from the phone. Of course I do. That was a great trip. You were so excited when you saw the White House, I continued. You said you were going to be president someday. Hayden smiled. Childhood dreams. You were such a kind boy, Hayden, always looking out for others. His smile faded. What are you getting at, Mom? Nothing, I answered quickly. I just remembered. Look, he lowered his voice. If this is about how I treat you again, let's not ruin the trip. We took you with us to see Europe. Enjoy it. I am enjoying it, I lied. I just wanted to tell you that I love you. He patted me awkwardly on the shoulder. I love you too, Mom. Oh, look, Laurel's waving at us. Let's go. That brief conversation left a bitter taste. My son no longer wanted to talk about the past, about the way he used to be. He had become a different person, successful, confident, but cold and detached, especially towards me. I thought about Harry a lot in those days. What would he have said when he saw what our son had become? Harry had always been able to find common ground with Hayden, even during the most difficult teenage years. Give him space, Edith, he'd say. The boy needs to grow up on his own. But I don't think even Harry would approve of the way Hayden was treating me now. Our journey was coming to an end. After Barcelona, we were to spend 3 days in Paris and then return home. I tried not to show my disappointment at the trip, which had turned into a series of humiliations and loneliness. Every morning, I woke up thinking, maybe today will be better. And every night, I fell asleep with the realization that nothing had changed. Paris greeted us with torrential rain. We arrived early in the morning, soaked on the way from the cab to the hotel, and everyone was in a lousy mood. The hotel was an old building in the Montmartre neighborhood, with narrow corridors and creaky floorboards, but with a certain charm. Moldings on the ceilings, antique furniture, views of the rooftops of Paris from the windows. The hotel looks authentic, I remarked as we climbed the stairs. Authentically outdated, Laurel snorted. And there's no elevator. How are we going to get up there with suitcases? I'll help, Hayden offered, grabbing her bag. Mom, will you be okay on your own? He didn't even look up from his question. I nodded silently even though he couldn't see it and started slowly up the stairs, dragging my suitcase. The arthritis in my knees was making itself known, but I didn't want to complain. As usual, I got the worst room, a small room under the roof, with a sloping ceiling and a tiny window. But I was so used to it that I wasn't even surprised. After unpacking, I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. I was tired from 2 weeks of traveling, and my body was begging for rest. But half an hour later, there was a knock at the door. Grandma, are you coming with us? Penny asked, peering into the room. We're going to the Louvre. I wanted to say no, that I was too tired. But when I saw my granddaughter's pleading eyes, I realized that she and Bryce were counting on me to go with them. Otherwise, they'd be left alone in the hotel, or worse, forced to walk around the museum when they wanted to play. Of course, honey, I replied, rising. Give me 10 minutes. At the Louvre, the familiar scenario repeated itself. After the first hour of the tour, the kids started whining that they were tired and bored. Laurel looked at me irritably. Edith, why don't you take them to the cafe? Hayden and I want to see the Impressionist collection. The Impressionists are at the Orsay, dear, not the Louvre. Hayden corrected her quietly. What difference does it make? She snapped at him. Anyway, the children don't belong here. Of course I'll take care of them, I agreed. Where do you want me to meet you? At the exit in 3 hours, Hayden answered, already leading Laurel away. I was left with the kids in the middle of the huge museum, not knowing where to go. We found a cafe, grabbed a bite to eat, and then decided to see at least part of the exhibit. Let's find the Mona Lisa, I suggested. It's the most famous painting in the world. The children agreed, and we went in search of it. The Louvre turned out to be a real labyrinth, but with the help of a map and signs, we finally reached the right room. There were tons of people crowded in front of the famous painting, and I lifted Penny in my arms so she could see Leonardo's masterpiece. It's so small, Penny said disappointedly. And why is everyone taking pictures of her? Because she's very famous, I explained. And she has a mysterious smile. See? Not really, Penny answered honestly. Can we see something else now? We wandered around the museum for another hour, looking at ancient Egyptian artifacts, Greek statues, medieval tapestries. I tried to tell the kids interesting stories about each exhibit, and they listened with amazing attention. At such moments, I felt truly needed, when I could share my knowledge, when I saw my grandchildren's eyes light up with new discoveries. When we met Hayden and Laurel at the exit, the children began to tell us what they had seen. Daddy, we saw a real mummy, Bryce said excitedly. And a sarcophagus! And the Venus of Molossa, Penny added. Grandma said no one knows where her hands went. Hayden looked at me in surprise. You had time to see so much? We had time, I shrugged. The kids were very inquisitive. Laurel pressed her lips together. I hope you didn't bore them with your lectures. No, Mom, it was great, Bryce objected. Grandma knows so many interesting things. There was an expression on Laurel's face that I couldn't decipher, a mixture of annoyance and jealousy? Jealousy? Did it hurt her that the kids chose to go on a field trip with me rather than sit in the cafeteria? In the evening, Hayden and Laurel went out to dinner alone again, leaving me with the kids at the hotel. We ordered room service food and had a picnic on the floor, spreading out a blanket. I told them stories about my childhood, about how their grandfather and I met, about their dad's early years. Did Dad really want to be a veterinarian? Bryce wondered. Yes, he loved animals, I confirmed. He had a whole collection of encyclopedias about different species. He'd even worked part-time in high school at the vet's office taking care of sick animals. Why did he change his mind? Penny asked. I sighed. Probably decided it was more lucrative to be a manager. Sometimes adults make decisions with their heads instead of their hearts. I don't want to do that, Bryce said seriously. I'm going to do what I love. That's right, honey. I patted him on the head. Don't tell Mom I taught you that. She thinks I'm giving you bad advice. Why doesn't Mommy love you, Grandma? Penny suddenly asked with childlike candor. The question caught me off guard. What are you talking about, honey? Of course she does. No, Penny shook her head. She always gets mad when you talk to us, and she tells Daddy you're weird. I felt a lump come up in my throat. Well, adults have complicated relationships, I said, but that doesn't mean we don't love each other. I love you, Grandma, Penny said, hugging me. And so does Bryce. And I love you too, my good ones, I replied, hugging both children. More than anything in the world. When the kids were asleep, I went back to my room. It was about 10 o'clock at night. Hayden and Laurel hadn't come back yet. I felt exhausted, not so much physically, but emotionally. Penny's words wouldn't leave my mind. Could Laurel really be that intolerant of me? And what does she say about me to Hayden when I'm not around? I decided to take a bath to relax. This old hotel had a real cast iron bathtub on lion's feet with gilded faucets. I filled it with hot water, added some shower gel to make a lather, and sank into the water with my eyes closed. I don't know how long I spent in the tub, but the water was starting to cool down when I heard voices. At first I thought it was the neighbors, but then I realized that the voices were coming from the ventilation grate in the wall. It was a common occurrence in old houses, the sounds of the pipes traveling through the building. I was about to get out of the tub when I heard my name. It was Laurel's voice. I don't know why you insisted on taking Edith with us. She's just ruining everything. She's my mother, Laurel, Hayden replied. His voice sounded tired. What was I supposed to do? Leave her home alone for 2 weeks? Why not? She's a grown woman. She could handle it. She's always wanted to see Europe. And she helps with the kids. Laurel snorted. Helping? She's filling their heads with nonsense. And she's always undermining our authority. Did you see the way they were raving about the museum today? As if we couldn't tell them the same things. You didn't want to go to the museum with them, Hayden reminded us. That's not the point. Laurel's voice rose. The point is that she's trying to turn the kids against us. All those stories about how you used to be, how you loved animals. Why is she doing this? She's just reminiscing about the past, Hayden said. It's harmless. No, it's not. She's trying to show the kids that you've changed for the worse, that you used to be better. She's manipulating them. There was a pause. I sat in the cooling water, afraid to move so I wouldn't miss a word. You know, Hayden finally said, sometimes I think we should find her a nursing home. I caught my breath. A nursing home? My own son wants to put me in a nursing home? I've been saying that for a long time, Laurel said immediately. She's only keeping us from having a normal life. It's a burden. We can't have friends over because she's always there. We can't have a romantic evening because she's always there. Even on this trip, she managed to ruin everything with her whining and procrastination. I didn't say it had to be right now, Hayden countered. Just maybe in a year or two, when she's old. She's already old, Laurel exclaimed. And it's only going to get worse every year. Imagine the effects she'll have on the children if we don't take action. Let's not talk about that now, Hayden said tiredly. We have one last night in Paris. Let's just enjoy it. Okay, Laurel agreed. But we'll get back to this conversation at home. The voices died down, and I was alone in the silence of the bathroom. I didn't know how long I'd been sitting there in the cool water, staring at the same spot. Something inside me had broken. The last thread tying me to the hope that things would get better was severed. A burden. That's what I was to them. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not a family member. Just a burden to be gotten rid of at the earliest opportunity. I climbed out of the tub, wiped myself down, and put on my robe. My hands were shaking, but not from the cold. It was anger, pain, from the realization of betrayal. Sitting down on the bed, I began to think feverishly. What do I do? How could I continue to live with them after what I'd heard? How can I look my son in the eye knowing that he plans to send me to a nursing home? And then it hit me. I don't have to put up with this. I don't have to wait for them to decide my fate. I can act on my own. I turned on the lamp and pulled my purse out of my purse. I counted my cash and credit cards. Then I opened the laptop that Hayden had made me bring with me just in case. I didn't use it much, but right now it was the perfect thing to have. An hour later, I had already booked a flight to Phoenix City for tomorrow morning. The flight was an early 6 a.m. flight, but that was even better. I'll leave while they sleep. No scenes, no explanations. Just disappear from their lives like they want me to. I packed quickly, packing the essentials. Some of the clothes I decided to keep, I didn't like them anyway. Laurel had picked them out. Then I wrote a quick note. Hayden and Laurel, I've decided to come home early. Don't worry about me. I'm a grown woman and will be fine on my own. Enjoy the rest of your day in Paris. Edith. Not a word about the overheard conversation, not a hint of my true feelings. Let them think what they want. In the morning, I slipped quietly out of the room with my suitcase. It was 5 a.m. The hotel was still asleep. I left a note at the front desk, asking her to give it to my son, and went outside. Paris was waking up. Bakers were opening their shops. Janitors were sweeping the sidewalks, and rare cabs drove through the empty streets. I caught a cab and headed for the airport. Sitting in the back seat, I stared out the window at the city and thought about the fact that I might never see it again. But the strange thing was, I wasn't sorry. All the beauty of Paris was poisoned for me by the words I had heard yesterday. At the airport, I checked in and sat in the waiting area. There was still an hour and a half until my flight. I pulled out my phone, but I didn't check to see if Hayden had called. Instead, I dialed my friend Vivian's number. Edith? She answered sleepily. Do you know what time it is? I'm sorry, Viv, I said. I'm at the airport in Paris. I'm on my way home. What? What about your family? It's a long story. I'll tell you when I get back. Can you pick me up at the airport tomorrow? Sure, honey. But what happened? I figured it out, Viv. You were right about them. They don't think of me as family. I could hear the worry in Vivian's voice. Edith, are you okay? You're not doing anything stupid? On the contrary, I answered with a bitter laugh. For the first time in years, I'm going to do the smart thing. The flight from Paris to New York and then to Phoenix City had not been easy. I was exhausted physically and emotionally. But with each mile away from Europe, I could feel my resolve growing. By the time the plane landed in Phoenix City, the plan was fully matured in my mind. Vivian met me at the airport. She was the only person I could completely trust. We'd been friends for over 40 years, ever since we started school together. Jesus, Edith, you look terrible, she said, hugging me. Come to my place. I'll make you a proper dinner and you can tell me all about it. I finally felt safe in Vivian's apartment. I told her everything about the trip, about the constant humiliation, about the overheard conversation. She listened without interrupting, only occasionally shaking her head or clenching her fists in indignation. What are you going to do? She asked me when I was done. Sell the house, I answered firmly. I own the house. Harry and I bought it long before Hayden was born, and when my husband died, it passed completely to me. I'm going to sell it and start a new life. What are you going to do on your own? I'll get an apartment, or even buy a little house in a quiet neighborhood somewhere. I have savings, plus my pension, and the money from the sale of the house will provide me with a comfortable old age. Vivian tapped her fingers on the table thoughtfully. Are you sure? That's a pretty radical decision. I'm absolutely sure. I nodded. I can't go on living with people who think I'm a burden, who plan to put me in a nursing home, who don't like me. Well, Vivian straightened up. Then let's do it. We'll contact the realtor tomorrow. The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. I stayed with Vivian, not wanting to go back to my house until Hayden and Laurel returned. We met with the realtor, an older woman named Nancy, who specialized in selling houses in our neighborhood. Your house is in great condition, Mrs. Barmbrack, she said after the inspection, and it's a very desirable neighborhood. I think we can sell it quickly and for a good price. How quickly? I asked. Under favorable circumstances, in a month and a half. But there is one thing. You mentioned that your son and his family live in the house? Yes, but the house belongs to me, I answered confidently. In that case, we'll have to give them an eviction notice. By law, it's a minimum of 30 days. I nodded. Do whatever you need to do. I want everything to be legal. After the realtor, we visited an attorney who confirmed my rights to the house and helped draft a formal eviction notice for Hayden and Laurel. The papers were to be handed to them as soon as they returned. What about their belongings? The lawyer asked. If they refuse to move out voluntarily, we could run into problems. Their personal belongings will stay with them, I replied. But the furniture, appliances, everything that was in the house before they moved in is mine. We also discussed the issue of a new place for me to live. Nancy showed me several options for apartments and small houses in quieter parts of town. I chose a small one-story house with a garden in a neighborhood where mostly older people lived. It was much smaller and more modest than our family home, but cozy and fully adapted for an elderly person. We could make a preliminary contract now, Nancy suggested, and finalize the purchase after the sale of your current home. I agreed. Everything happened so fast that sometimes I felt dizzy, but every time I hesitated, I remembered Laurel's words. It's just a liability. And my resolve returned. The small apartment on the second floor of the old brick house greeted me with silence and the smell of lavender. The owner had put a bunch in a vase on the coffee table. I looked around my new home. One bedroom, a living room with a kitchen, a modest bathroom. Everything was simple, but clean and neat. White walls, beige carpet, furniture that had seen better days, but was still in good condition. I hope you'll be comfortable here, Mrs. Barmbrack, said the owner, an older woman named Gloria Finch. If you need anything, I live on the first floor. Just knock. Thank you, Mrs. Finch, I said, accepting the keys. I'm sure I'll like it here. Please call me Gloria, she smiled. We don't like formalities here. When she left, I sat down on the couch and let myself exhale for the first time in days. Events had moved so fast that I'd barely had time to comprehend them. Just 5 days ago, I'd been in Paris, listening to my son and his wife call me a burden. And now I was sitting in an unfamiliar apartment in a Phoenix City neighborhood I'd never been to before, determined to start a new life. Vivian had helped me find this apartment through her cousin who lived nearby. The rent was reasonable, especially since utilities were included. I could afford to live here on my teacher's pension, while the issues of selling the house and buying a new place were resolved. My suitcase, the same one I'd traveled to Europe with, stood by the door. It contained everything I had taken with me: a few sets of clothes, toiletries, medicine, a photo album with family pictures and documents. The rest of my belongings remained in the house where I had lived for almost 50 years. It was a strange feeling to fit my life into one suitcase at 77. I got up and started unpacking. I hung clothes in the closet, arranged the pictures on the dresser Harry on our wedding day. Little Hayden on his bike, the three of us on a picnic in the mountains. Happy moments that now seemed so far away. My phone rang as I finished unpacking. Hayden's number. It was the 20th call in the last 2 days since I'd flown out of Paris without saying a word. I didn't answer, just like I hadn't answered any of the others. Let her suffer. Let her feel some of the anxiety I'd felt all those years living under the same roof with people who didn't respect me. Instead, I called Vivian. "How are you settling in?" she asked without preamble. "It's fine," I answered. "The apartment is nice and the landlady is friendly. Thanks for helping me with the search." "You're welcome, dear. I'm glad you finally decided to take this step. It's been a long time coming." "I know," I sighed. "It's just a shame it took so long and so much humiliation before I finally saw the light." "Better late than never," Vivian said philosophically. "Is Hayden still calling?" "Constantly. I don't answer." "Good. Let him suffer. How are you feeling?" "I've been thinking about that question. How do I feel? Hurt? Angry? Scared?" "Free," I finally answered. For the first time in years, I felt free. After talking to Vivian, I decided to go out and explore the neighborhood. The neighborhood was modest but well-maintained small houses with neat yards, family-owned stores, a small park with a playground. Not at all like the suburbs with the big mansions where I used to live. I walked to the grocery store 2 blocks away. It was cool inside and smelled like fresh bread. I grabbed a basket and started walking slowly between the rows, picking out groceries. I used to always cook for a large family. Hayden loved meat. Laurel preferred vegetables. The kids loved pasta. Now I could buy what I liked without thinking about other people's preferences. I chose a fresh baguette, some cheese, grapes, a jar of olives, a package of tea, and a few apples. A simple dinner for one person. "Are you new here?" the older man behind the cash register asked me as he packed my purchases. "Yes, I just moved in today," I replied. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he smiled. "My name is Sam, and I own this store. If you need anything, just let me know." "Thank you, Sam. I'm Edith," I introduced myself, surprised at his friendliness. "Nice to meet you, Edith. Come again." On the way home, I thought about how little attention I had paid to such simple things as the friendliness of strangers. For years, I had lived in my own little world where Hayden, Laurel, and the grandchildren were the main characters. I had little contact with my neighbors, rarely went out alone. My life had narrowed down to their needs and expectations. Back at the apartment, I set out my shopping, made tea, and sat by the window looking out at the street. People walked by, moms with strollers, elderly couples, teenagers on bicycles, the ordinary life of an ordinary neighborhood, and now I was part of it. The phone rang again. Hayden. And again, I didn't answer it. Instead, I listened to the voicemail message he'd left. "Mom, please pick up. We're going crazy with worry. Where are you? Why did you fly away without saying a word? We're coming back tomorrow. I hope you'll be home. Please call me." His voice sounded worried, but I felt no sympathy. Where was his concern when he and Laurel were discussing sending me to a nursing home? Where was his concern when they called me a burden? I deleted the message and turned off the sound on my phone. I didn't want to think about Hayden and his problems anymore today. Today was the first day of my new life, and I was going to enjoy it. I spent the next few days setting up the apartment and familiarizing myself with the neighborhood. I bought some plants to liven up the space, hung curtains I found at a local home goods store, found the nearest library, and signed up there, picking up a few books. I've been wanting to reread Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte for a long time. On the third day, I decided to visit a local cafe I'd spotted while walking around. Roses, the modest sign read. It was cozy inside. Wooden tables, soft armchairs, bookshelves along the walls. Behind the counter stood a middle-aged woman with bright red hair. "Welcome," she smiled. "What would you like to order?" "A cup of tea, please," I said. "And maybe something to go with it?" "We have great blueberry muffins, fresh out of the oven." "Sounds wonderful." I sat down at a table by the window and watched the customers. They were mostly locals. I was starting to recognize some of them from my walks. An elderly couple at a neighboring table were passionately discussing a book they were reading together. A young mother was feeding a toddler in the corner. Two men were playing chess, occasionally commenting loudly on the moves. "Are you new to our neighborhood?" the red-haired woman asked, bringing my order. "Yes, I moved in 3 days ago," I replied. "I'm Rose, the owner of this place," she introduced herself. "And you are?" "Edith Barmbrack." "Nice to meet you, Edith. If you'd like to meet the locals, come by Wednesday night. We're having a book club meeting." "Thanks, I might do that," I smiled, surprised at the invitation. The blueberry muffin was delicious, moist, flavorful, with the sourness of the berries. I couldn't remember the last time I'd enjoyed a simple meal so much. At home, I always cooked what others liked, often ignoring my own preferences. As I finished my tea, an older woman from the couple discussing the book approached my table. "I apologize for the intrusion," she said. "My husband and I couldn't help noticing that you were new. I'm Margaret Wilson, and this is my husband, John." "Edith Barmbrack," I introduced myself, shaking her hand. "We've lived in this neighborhood for 30 years, Margaret continued. "If you need anything, don't hesitate to call. We're at number 27 Maple Street." "Thank you, that's very kind of you." "Did you move in alone?" John asked. "Yes," I nodded. "I decided to start a new life." "That's brave," Margaret said approvingly. "Not everyone at our age can do that." We talked some more. They talked about the neighborhood, where to buy groceries, which doctor was the most caring, what activities were going on at the community center. I listened with interest, amazed at how easily and naturally the conversation flowed. No tension, no fear of saying the wrong thing. "Come over for dinner Friday night," Margaret suggested as they left. "Nothing fancy, just a home-cooked meal and good company." "I'd love to," I agreed, not believing my luck. Only 3 days in a new place, and already I had an invitation to dinner. When I got home, I found several missed calls from Hayden again. He left another message. "Mom, we're back. You're not home. Where'd you go? We've called the hospitals, the police. Please call as soon as you hear this message." I felt a prick of conscience. Maybe I'm being too cruel. Maybe I should at least let him know I'm okay. But then I remembered their conversation in Paris, Laurel's words, "This burden is only a hindrance." And my resolve returned. No, let him suffer a little longer. Let him feel what it's like to worry about someone without knowing where they are or what's wrong with them. Instead, I wrote a quick message to Vivian. "All is well, met the neighbors, invited to dinner Friday night. Hayden calls constantly, I don't answer." She replied almost immediately. "Good job, proud of you. Hang in there." On Wednesday, I decided to go to Rose's Cafe for book club. I brought along a Jane Austen tome I'd recently borrowed from the library, though I wasn't sure if it was the book they were discussing. The cafe was full of people, about 15 people of various ages, from students to retirees. They had pushed tables together in the center of the room, forming a large circle. Rose saw me and waved, "Edith, I'm glad you're here. Come and join us." I sat down in a vacant chair, feeling a little nervous. When was the last time I'd been to a book club? I think it was before Hayden was born. "Today we're discussing Louisa May Alcott's Little Women," announced a young woman who appeared to be the group leader. "But first, let's introduce ourselves for our new participant." One by one, they called out their names. Jennifer, Michael, Eleanor, Thomas, Grace, and others. I tried to memorize them, but there were too many. They all smiled at me, nodded, made friendly remarks. And now it's your turn, said Jennifer, the group leader. My name is Edith Barmbrack, I began. I recently moved to the neighborhood. I used to be an elementary school teacher. I love classic literature, especially 19th century English novels. That's wonderful, Jennifer exclaimed. Next month, we're going to discuss Pride and Prejudice. And today, if you haven't read Little Women, just listen to it. Many of us reread this book every year. The discussion was lively. People argued about the characters, about plot twists, about how relevant the themes of the book are in today's world. I mostly listened but voiced my opinion a few times, especially when the conversation turned to parenting and family values. I've always admired Marmee, I said. She raised 4 daughters alone while her husband was at war, and she did it with such wisdom and patience. Yes, but sometimes she was too soft, objected Eleanor, an older woman with gray hair. Jo needed a firmer hand. I disagree, Grace, a young woman with tattoos on her arms, interjected. Jo was a creative person. Too strict an upbringing would have broken her spirit. The discussion continued, and I was surprised to find myself fully engaged. When was the last time I discussed a book so passionately? When was the last time someone was interested in my opinion? After the meeting ended, many people came up to me to continue the conversation or just to greet me. Eleanor, the same older woman with whom we'd argued about Jo's upbringing, sat down next to me when most had already dispersed. You were a teacher, right? She asked. Yes, 35 years in elementary school, I confirmed. I was a teacher too, she smiled. High school math, 42 years of experience. Wow, that's impressive. Not as impressive as starting a new life at our age, she remarked, looking at me carefully. What brings you here, Edith? If it's no secret, of course. I wondered, should I tell this strange woman about my problems? But something in her gaze, understanding, wise, made me open up. I lived with my son and his family, I began. Or rather, they lived with me in my house. And over time, I became a burden to them. At least, that's what they thought. Eleanor nodded without interrupting. Recently, we went to Europe, and I overheard them discussing plans to send me to a nursing home, calling me a burden that would only interfere with their lives. That was the final straw. I came home before they did and decided to start a new life. Sell the house, buy something smaller, live on my own. That's a brave decision, Eleanor said approvingly. Not everyone would have had the courage. Sometimes I wonder if I'm too cruel, I admitted. My son calls all the time, worried, and I don't answer. Where was he when you needed respect and care? Eleanor asked. Where were his worries then? I couldn't find an answer. Look, Edith, she continued, I've lived a long life, and I've learned one important thing. It's never too late to start respecting yourself. It's never too late to say no to people who don't appreciate you, even if they are your own children. Her words touched me deeply. For the first time, someone fully supported my decision, without reservations or doubts. Even Vivian, for all her support, sometimes hinted that maybe I was being too hard on Hayden. Thank you, Eleanor, I said sincerely. Your words mean a lot to me. You're welcome, dear. We old teachers have to stick together, she said with a wink. By the way, I live a block away. If you want to talk or just have tea, come on in. Maple Street, number 35. I'd love to, I smiled. I felt strangely calm as I drove home. Seeing Eleanor with her unconditional support had made me sure I'd made the right decision. Yes, maybe I'd been cruel not to take Hayden's calls. But hadn't he been cruel, neglecting my feelings for years? Wasn't Laurel cruel to call me a burden? I've let them define my worth long enough. Long enough I've lived by their rules, in their shadow. Now it was time to live my own way. When I got back to the apartment, the phone rang again. Hayden, this time I was almost ready to answer it, but something stopped me. Not now. I wasn't ready to talk to him yet, to explain my feelings, to listen to his excuses or accusations. Instead, I turned on the radio, found a station with classical music, and made myself a light dinner, an omelet with cheese and greens. A simple meal that I loved but rarely cooked at home because Hayden preferred meat, and Laurel thought eggs were too caloric. Eating dinner alone, I thought about my life, about the decisions that had brought me to this point. Maybe my biggest mistake was that I'd been patient for too long. For too long, I turned a blind eye to disrespect, to neglect, to manipulation. Too long sacrificing myself for people who didn't appreciate it. Harry always said to me, "Edith, you're too nice to people. They take advantage of that." But I didn't listen. I thought that kindness always comes back, that if you give love, you get love in return. How wrong I was. I didn't blame Hayden, at least not entirely. He was a product of his upbringing, my upbringing. I'd let him grow up believing that the world revolved around him, that his needs always came first. And then I wondered why he grew up selfish. As for Laurel, I never gave her a chance. From the beginning, I saw her as a rival, the woman who took my son away from me. Maybe if I'd been more open, more understanding, we could have found common ground. But now it was too late for regrets. Too late for what ifs. I had made my choice and had to live with its consequences. On Friday, I went to Margaret and John Wilson's house for dinner. Their home turned out to be a cozy one-story cottage with a beautiful garden. Margaret met me at the door, dressed in a simple dress and apron. "Edith, I'm glad you've come," she greeted me. "Come in. John has just opened the wine." Inside the house was as cozy as outside. Soft furniture, bookshelves to the ceiling, pictures on the walls. John stood by the fireplace, pouring wine into glasses. "There's our new neighbor," he exclaimed. "Welcome, Edith. I wasn't the only guest." Two other couples were already at the table, Robert and Susan Parker, the elderly couple who lived next door, and Thomas Green, a widower with his daughter Lisa who had come to visit him. The dinner was simple but delicious. Roast, mashed potatoes, fresh salad, and apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily and casually. We talked about books, about movies, about politics, about life in our neighborhood. No one interrupted, no one rolled their eyes, no one looked with disdain. Everyone listened to each other with genuine interest. "So what brings you to our neighborhood, Edith?" Robert asked during dessert. "Change," I answered evasively. "I decided it was time to start a new chapter in my life." "That's brave," he nodded approvingly. "At our age, it's not easy to get out of your own way." "Sometimes it's necessary," Susan interjected. "You know, Robert and I moved here when we were older, too. We used to live in a big house on the north side of town where we raised 3 children. But when they moved away, the house got too big and empty. We decided it was time to move on. And we've never regretted it," Robert added. "Here we found real friends, new interests. Life doesn't end with retirement, it just changes." Their words made me think, maybe this move is not the end, but the beginning. Maybe there are more good things to come. After dinner, as we were having coffee in the living room, the phone in my purse vibrated. I knew who it was without looking at the screen. Hayden, another call I'm going to ignore. "You don't want to answer it?" Margaret asked, noticing me looking at my purse. "No," I shook my head. It doesn't matter." The door to my apartment shook with a loud knock. I knew who it was before I even went to the peephole. Hayden. His face, contorted with anger, was barely recognizable. Laurel stood next to him, arms crossed over her chest, with the same expression of superiority I knew so well. It had been a week since their return from Europe. A week of calls, texts, attempts to find me through mutual acquaintances. I'd ignored everything, enjoying my new life. But apparently Vivian couldn't take their onslaught and told me where I lived. Or maybe they hired a private investigator. Either way, they found me. I took a deep breath, gathering my strength, and opened the door. "Mom!" Hayden exclaimed, stepping forward. "What the hell is going on?" "Hello, Hayden," I answered calmly. "Laurel, I wasn't expecting to see you." "You didn't?" He repeated in disbelief. "You disappear without a trace, don't answer your phone, and then say you didn't expect to see us?" "Come in," I said, ignoring his outrage. "Let's not make a scene on the landing." They entered the apartment, looking around with undisguised contempt. My humble abode was clearly not up to their standards. "What is this place?" Laurel asked, squeamishly touching the old couch with her fingertips. "Why are you living here?" It's my new apartment, I answered, closing the door. It's temporary until I buy a smaller house. A smaller house? Hayden interjected. What are you talking about? We have a house. I gave him a long look. No, Hayden, I had a house, and now I'm selling it. There was silence. Hayden and Laurel looked at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. What? Hayden finally squeezed out. You're, selling the house? Our house? My house, I corrected. The one I'd inherited from your father. The one I've let you live in for years. But you can't just sell it, Laurel exclaimed. We're living there. Where are we going to live? I don't know, Laurel, I shrugged. Maybe rent an apartment or buy your own house. You both have good jobs and you can afford it. Hayden shook his head, as if trying to recover from the shock. Mom, is this some kind of joke? If you're offended by something, let's discuss. It's not a joke, Hayden, I said firmly. And it's not about offense. It's about respect, or rather, the lack thereof. What are you talking about? He asked. We've always respected you. I grinned bitterly. Really? Then why did I hear you and Laurel discussing plans to put me in a nursing home? How Laurel called me a burden that was just a nuisance to you? Their faces changed. Hayden turned pale and Laurel blushed with anger or embarrassment. Did you eavesdropped on our conversation? Hayden asked, lowering his voice. Not on purpose. That hotel in Paris had a vent in the bathroom. The sounds traveled all over the floor. I heard every word. Mom, you misunderstood. Hayden began to defend himself. We didn't mean. No, Hayden, I interrupted him. I got it right. And that was the final push. I've put up with disrespect, disregard, manipulation for a long time, but not anymore. Is that why you decided to get back at us by selling the house? Laurel stepped in. Very mature, Edith. I'm not taking revenge, Laurel, I replied calmly. I'm starting a new life, a life where I'm respected and valued. By who? She asked defiantly. Those old people in this seedy neighborhood? Yes, I nodded. These people you so contemptuously call old people have shown me more respect and care in a week than you have in all the years we've known each other. Laurel snorted, but didn't have an answer. Mom, Hayden changed tactics, his voice softer. Look, we're all tired after the trip. Maybe we said something we shouldn't have, but we're family. We love you. Please come home. No, Hayden, I said firmly. I'm not going back. The house is already on the market and there are interested buyers. You'll have to find a new place to live. You can't do this to us, Laurel exploded. Where are we going to live? What are we going to tell the kids? Tell them the truth, I suggested. That Grandma has decided to live apart, that this is her house and she has the right to use it as she sees fit. What about their things? Their rooms? Their toys? Laurel continued. All of their personal belongings will stay with them, of course, I replied. You have 30 days to take everything you own. 30 days? Hayden exclaimed. You're evicting us in 30 days? That's the law, I shrugged. I'd already consulted a lawyer. It's by the book. Hayden clenched his fists, his face red with anger. You're going to regret this, Mom. We'll sue. We'll prove that you're incompetent, that you can't make these decisions. You can try, I replied calmly. My lawyer is sure you don't stand a chance. I am fully capable and I legally own the house. You haven't seen the kids in almost 2 weeks, Laurel interjected. They miss you. They cry every night asking where Grandma is. It was a low blow and they knew it. Using the kids to manipulate me is an old tactic. I miss them too, I said softly. And I'd be happy to see them, but on my terms, not yours. What does that mean? Hayden asked suspiciously. It means I won't let you use me as a free babysitter anymore. If I'm going to see Bryce and Penny, it's because I'm their grandmother who loves them, not because you need an evening alone. You're being unfair, Hayden shook his head. Maybe, I agreed. But it's my decision, and I'm not changing it. Laurel stood up abruptly from the couch. Come on, Hayden, it's no use. She's not going to change her mind. Hayden rose slowly, looking at me with an expression I couldn't decipher, a mixture of anger, bewilderment, and perhaps respect. You've changed, Mom, he said. Yes, I have, I nodded. And that's a good thing. When they left, slamming the door so hard the walls shook, I sank down on the couch and covered my face with my hands. The tension I'd been holding in all this time finally burst out in tears. I cried not from grief or regret, but from relief. I'd done it. I finally expressed everything I had accumulated over years of silence and patience. The phone rang. Vivian. Edith? Hayden called me. He's furious. What happened? I told her about our meeting, about how I'd held on, not giving in to their pressure. I'm proud of you, my friend, Vivian said when I was done. Not everyone has the strength to stand up to their own children. You know, I admitted, I feel strange. Like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Like I can finally breathe. It's called freedom, darling, Vivian grinned. Get used to the feeling. The next few days were intense. Hayden called every day, begging or threatening. Laurel spread rumors among our mutual acquaintances that I was out of my mind, that I had senile dementia. Some called me, concerned by this talk. I patiently explained my position without going into the details of the family conflict. On the 5th day after their visit, I received a letter from an attorney. Hayden was indeed trying to challenge my capacity and right to sell the house. But my attorney was prepared for this. He had gathered all the necessary documents to prove my mental health and legal rights to the house. It was going to be an uphill battle, but I was ready. That same evening, sitting at Rose's cafe, I explained the situation to my new friends, Eleanor, Margaret, and John Rose. Are they trying to declare you incompetent? Eleanor was outraged. How insolent! My son is a lawyer, said John. He specializes in just such cases. I could ask him to advise you for free. And my brother works at the newspaper, Rose added. If it goes to court, we can publicize it. Nobody likes children who kick their elderly parents out of their own homes. I was touched by their support. These people I had only known for a few weeks were willing to stand up for me without hesitation. Thank you all, I said, tears welling up in my eyes. I don't know why I deserve this support. You earned it by finally standing up for yourself, Eleanor said simply. That's worthy of respect. 2 weeks after their visit, I got a text from Bryce and Penny. They had recorded a video on Hayden's phone, begging me to come home. Their little faces, wet with tears, broke my heart. But I realized this was just another manipulation by Hayden and Laurel. They were using the kids to pressure me. I recorded a response video explaining to my grandchildren that I loved them with all my heart, but that Grandma needed to live apart. That we would definitely see each other, just not every day. That they could always call me and I would answer. I tried to speak simply and honestly, without blaming their parents. Eventually, Hayden and Laurel gave in. They found a house to rent on the other side of town and started moving things around. My lawyer informed me that they had withdrawn the lawsuit to declare me incompetent. Apparently, they realized they weren't going to win that case. One day when I came home from the store, Hayden was waiting for me in the driveway, alone, without Laurel. Mom, he said, taking a step toward me. Can I talk to you for a second? I nodded and we went up to my apartment. He sat down on the couch, nervously tugging at the sleeve of his sweater. We're moving next week, he began. We found a house in the West End. It's not as big as yours, but it's decent enough. I'm glad, I said sincerely. It's a nice neighborhood. Mom, he looked up at me. I still don't understand why you did it. Why didn't you talk to us? Why didn't you explain what was bothering you? I sighed. How could I explain to him the years of accumulated hurt, humiliation, neglect? How do I tell him how much it hurt to be invisible in my own home? Hayden, I tried. Many times. But you wouldn't listen. You thought I was old and stupid, a burden that kept you from living. That's not true, he shook his head. We love you. Perhaps in our own way, I agreed. But not with the respect I deserve. Not as a person with your own wants, your own needs, your own feelings. I didn't know you felt that way, he said quietly. Because you never asked, I replied. Never took an interest in my feelings. I was just a convenient grandmother who was always handy. Hayden was silent, looking down at the floor. The kids miss you, he finally said. I miss them too. And I'll be glad to see them when you get settled in. And me? He asked, looking up. Would you be happy to see me too? I wondered. Despite all the hurt, he was still my son, the only child I'd raised with such love. Time will tell, Hayden, I answered honestly. Wounds don't heal quickly, but I hope that someday we can build a new relationship. one based on mutual respect. He nodded, accepting my answer. As he walked away, I felt strangely relieved, like I had closed one chapter of my life and opened a new one. The house was sold a month later to a couple with 2 children who offered even more than the asking price. I signed all the necessary paperwork and received a check that provided me with a comfortable life for many years to come. With the proceeds, I bought a small cozy house in the same neighborhood where I rented an apartment. 1 story, with a small garden, fully adapted for an elderly person, without steps, with wide doorways, with handrails in the bathroom. The perfect place for a peaceful old age. A year later, my life had changed beyond recognition. I was no longer a shadow in someone else's house, an inconspicuous figure in the background of someone else's life. I was Edith Barmbrack, a woman with her own house, her own friends, her own hobbies. 3 times a week, I went to a book club at Rose's Cafe. We read and discussed classics, modern literature, poetry. I even started writing my own short stories based on my teaching experience. Some of them were published in the local newspaper. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I attended yoga classes for seniors at the community center. The instructor, a young woman named Samantha, customized the exercises for our age and physical abilities. My arthritis almost stopped bothering me, and my posture improved dramatically. On weekends, I often hosted small dinners for friends: Eleanor, Margaret, and John, Rose, Walter, and other neighbors. We cooked together, drank wine, talked about books, about politics, about life. No one interrupted me or rolled their eyes when I gave my opinion. No one thought I was a burden. Bryce and Penny came to visit me twice a month. Hayden would drop them off Saturday morning and pick them up Sunday evening. We baked cookies, played board games, read books. I told them stories about my childhood, about their grandfather, about what their father was like when they were young. They listened with their mouths open, asked questions, laughed at old family jokes. With Hayden, the relationship remained strained. He still couldn't fully understand or accept my decision. Laurel refused to talk to me at all, thinking I was a traitor. But that didn't bother me anymore. I finally realized that I didn't have to be a convenient mother or grandmother, that I had a right to my own life, my own happiness. One evening, a year after that fateful trip to Europe, I sat in my garden enjoying the sunset. The roses I had planted in the spring were beginning to bloom. From the open window came the sounds of classical music, Chopin, my favorite composer. In my hands, I had a cup of tea and a new book Eleanor had given me. I thought about my life, about the decisions that had brought me to this moment, about how long I had let others define my worth, about how scary yet liberating it was to finally say no, about how much I gained by losing what I thought was most important. The phone rang. Hayden. Our conversations were still infrequent and awkward, but we were trying. At least he was trying. "Hi, Mom," he said when I answered. "How are you?" "I'm good, Hayden. Sitting in the garden, enjoying the sunset." "Sounds nice," he said quietly. "Mom, I was wondering, the kids want to spend a week of summer vacation with you. Is that okay with you?" Before, he would have just said he was sending the kids to me, wouldn't ask for my opinion or consent. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. "I'd love to," I replied. "I just have vacation plans. My friends and I are going to Lake Mead for a couple days. The kids are going to love it." "Friends?" I could hear the surprise in his voice. "You're going to the lake with your friends?" "Yes," I confirmed. "Eleanor, Margaret and John, Rose, Walter. We've rented a little cottage on the shore. We'll swim, fish, roast marshmallows on the fire." "Sounds fun," he said after a pause. "I'm happy for you, Mom." And, I believed he really was happy. Maybe not completely, maybe with reservations, but happy nonetheless. Maybe he was beginning to realize that I deserved my own happiness, that I wasn't just his mother, but a person with a life of my own. When we finished talking, I went back to contemplating the sunset. The sun was slowly sinking below the horizon, coloring the sky in shades of pink, orange, and purple. A beautiful end to the day. A beautiful start to the night. I didn't know what the future would bring. Whether Hayden and I would ever be able to rebuild what had been destroyed. Whether Laurel would accept me as part of her family. How things would play out with my grandchildren as they grew older and began to form their own opinions. But I knew one thing: I would never go back to a life where I was disrespected, unappreciated, considered a burden. I deserved more than that. I deserved freedom, respect, friendship, love, and now I had it all. Perhaps it took me 77 years to learn to stand up for myself. I may have wasted a lot of time trying to be comfortable for everyone. But now, looking at the sunset, listening to music, thinking about my new friends and future plans, I had no regrets. Better late than never. Better to find myself at 77 than never to find myself at all.